Duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now, we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com. Men, I'm glad you're here. Got a great conversation for you today, as I always do, but this is going to be really interesting. A really interesting conversation that you're going to listen to. It's with Dave Hollis. Now, he's the co-owner of Hollis Company, and you may recognize his name, Dave Hollis. You may recognize the last name more because his wife, Rachel Hollis, is a very popular American author, motivational speaker, blogger, and he and her, they both have some podcasts that they do and things of that nature. There's a good chance that if you've heard about Rachel, it may be because your wife has told you about her or something along those lines. And she's just doing some really cool stuff that's just resonating with the ladies in some really, really good ways. And I wanted to talk to Dave because he's taken on a new role in his life. And that is a role where he's basically left Disney, several months back to come and work on this business, Hollis Company, where his wife is really the front and center personality. And it's a different perspective than what I experienced, for one. It's probably a different perspective than what most men experience in their life, where in most cases, just judging by the stats alone, you look out at the stats, most businesses are owned by men. Most higher income earners are men, those kinds of things. And so the guy still feels like, he's the front and center kind of personality of the family in a lot of cases. And especially when it comes to most of the podcasts and things that you and I listen to, it's usually going to be men leading the charge there, right? So Dave's in a unique spot. And I really wanted to have a conversation with him. One, I want to talk to him about what it was like leaving Disney, kind of that high profile world, and then coming to basically work on your wife's business that you also believe in, that now you get to be a part of. How does that impact him as a man? Where's this whole thing going? And just to have a real honest conversation about this. And I think we did, guys. I think we had a really, really great, honest conversation. If you're an entrepreneur, you're absolutely going to love this. If your wife is a fan of Rachel Hollis, she needs to listen to this podcast as well so she can kind of hear the other side of things. And I just liked hearing just the honest conversation between, just having a conversation with somebody else who is in business with their wife and those dynamics. And as Dave and I started talking, we kind of realized we're like the flip-flop personalities here. I mean, he is what my wife's role would be in our business, and Rachel is kind of like my role in our businesses. So we're just personality types. We're just, kind of flip-flop there, and which is great. It makes for a great conversation, and it makes for a great person that I need to keep in touch with, because he's doing some things that I wish I could do well. And his wife is doing some things that I wish my wife could do well. And so it's great to follow people who have some dynamics that are opposite from yours so we can learn from them. So guys, I know you're going to get a lot from this. Without further ado, here's Dave Hollis. Mr. Dave Hollis, welcome to the Wolf and Iron Podcast. I'm so glad to be talking to you.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate being here.
Well, this is going to be a really cool conversation because as you and I were talking before we started recording, my wife and I, we work together in my businesses, our businesses. You and Rachel, your wife, you work together. We're kind of flipped in some ways because in your case, Rachel's she's the one that's out front a little bit more. You're not quite as behind the scenes as my wife is. So you guys kind of come alongside and you both have a chance to shine. So we'll kind of talk about those dynamics a little bit. For me, with Rustic in Maine, primarily where my wife works, and for you guys who are listening that don't know, I've got a ring making business called Rustic in Maine. Most of you guys who have listened to the podcast know about this. But my wife and I work really, really closely together to make this business work. But she's more of the behind the scenes person, but just extremely valuable. So I'm really excited to have this conversation and just to kind of see what insights I can glean from how you guys get things done and your particular role in Hollis Company and all the different things you guys have got going on there and just how it's all come about. So Let's get into your story a little bit. I want to hear more about how you got to where you guys are now. So I know you were at Disney for a period of time. So just kind of give me just maybe I don't know, take as much time as you want to just tell us a little bit of your story and the story of for you and Rachel and how you guys got to where you are.
Right on. So I work with my wife. Her name is Rachel Hollis. She is a #1 New York Times best-selling author. She has live events, business conferences, as it were, that are just like life-changing 3-day gatherings of women, primarily, soon to be men and women. She creates great products. We have this company. It's called the Hollis Company, and we've been working together for about 9 months now. And just before I worked here with her, I spent 17 years at the Walt Disney Company. Our family lived in Los Angeles, or just outside of it, California. And I worked in Hollywood for almost the entirety of my career.
Wow.
And finished my time at Disney. I had, at the beginning of my time there, a whole bunch of different jobs in packaged media, but finished my time at Disney for the last 7 years as the head of sales for the movie studio. So I put movies into movie theaters, and when you work at the Walt Disney Company, that meant Disney live action, Disney animation, Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm. So every single big movie from every brand that mattered was a part of what I was selling to movie theaters who frankly would go out of business if they couldn't have just one of the Star Wars or Avengers films, which on one hand was pretty great, but on the other hand, didn't necessarily create the kind of challenge that a person who's, I'm just now turning 44 this week. I got plenty of life left to live. It wasn't the most challenging thing to sell such great product because I had such a great team. I had such great leadership. And at the same time that I was really kind of trying to figure out what in the world have I been put on this earth for, what am I going to do with this potential that God's put in my heart? My wife's business that she'd spent about 15 years of time building felt like it was at a place where she needed someone to partner on the operations and the kind of the business side of the business so that she could dedicate more of her time to creating, which is her spiritual gifting. So we had a conversation that started probably 4 years ago that in the kind of aftermath of a bunch of success with Star Wars and all of these record-breaking years that we were having on the Disney side had us decide together, hey, let's wholesale change our life. Go chase the dream of building something that has as its mission, putting tools in the hands of people, things that if they were to use them might change their life forever. And we've been doing that now for about 9 months. We moved our family, like I said, from LA to where we are now based in Austin, Texas, and are just loving a totally different life and a drinking out of the fire hydrant kind of experience as the platform and the books and the conferences and the merchandise that we're creating to, hopefully help people has really taken off over the course of this last year.
That's awesome. It's an incredible story. Tell me a little bit about how you said, working with Disney. In one sense, that's a really high profile thing, and there's a lot of press and publicity and whatnot. Plus, you're in Hollywood, and so there's connections and things like that, which are great. But you said the challenges really weren't there necessarily. It was almost like you're just performing a role of like helping the movies get to where everybody already wants to see them and that kind of stuff. What are the challenges that come with doing what you're doing with Hollis Company that have been rewarding, and just what does that kind of look like?
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest catalysts for wanting to make the change was our having, as a couple, walked into a personal development conference where this aha moment took place where I realized more than anything, that you have to be growing in order to be fulfilled. And that growth cannot happen inside of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And I had, for a long time, had as my #1 commodity in life the idea of certainty. The more certain I could be, managing my own or anybody else's expectations, creating walls around the possibility of things disrupting my safe place, my certainty, it came at the expense of growth. And so the decision to come running into this opportunity with my wife was in part an interest to welcome the possibility of failure in a way that was not necessarily possible in my old job. As much as there were things that could go wrong, on the whole, the movies were just too good, the teams were just too good, the brands were just too good. And here, as much as I have no interest in or think that we will, on the whole, fail, I'm in this role introduced to something that I don't know how to do on an almost daily basis. Forget that, even hourly basis. Yeah. And have come to redefine what failing is as a tool for me in a pursuit for growth. And it doesn't mean that it's not hard. I mean, there's times when I get really frustrated with having to fail and learn or admit that I don't know and ask. But the fruit that's coming in real time out of like embracing the discomfort of not actually being an expert at most of what I'm trying to do is creating a friction that ultimately in that friction is producing growth. And then that growth, again, is where fulfillment is born from. So we're in every aspect of the business as it's continued to grow, we're pioneering or attempting to pioneer something that can, again, be a tool for people in their lives, but that maybe hasn't necessarily existed, or that maybe in having it go direct from consumer takes the middle person that normally is delivering that tool out of the equation and has us trying to figure out how do you actually serve the customer, this community, in a way that doesn't have a rule book. And so in that, like, we're learning on the fly, but we're also, as we make mistakes, learning a lot from those mistakes as we go. And that's been a huge part of what has been rewarding in this experience.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about here on the podcast, or we've talked about a few times, is you can either choose comfort or the reward. But most of the time you don't get both. You know, if you want comfort, well, then that becomes your reward. That's the thing that you get kind of by default. You know, you want to stay in the job that's easy. You want to not move out of your comfort zone until you feel like you've mastered some level or whatever the case is. You want to move in the direction of easy. Well, comfort is the thing you're seeking, and that's what you're going to get. But if you want the reward, meaning the adventurous life, you want to live like nobody else does, like people just dream about, those kinds of things. If you want to really have this impactful life and legacy and things of that nature, there's a reward that you're only going to get on the outside of the comfort zone. And so, like you said, you've got to be willing to live and to grow and to fail outside of the things that make you comfortable if you really want to have the rewards that come along with it.
Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, that's it. I think I got my side. I think we cut out for a second there. I'll have my editor take that piece out.
I heard you at the end there. I just couldn't hear you in the middle. Yeah, sorry about that.
So what I was saying is that we've got basically, on the one hand, you've got either comfort or you've got the reward. You can't have both, right? Most of the time you don't get both. If comfort is your objective and you don't want to move outside of your objective being, I'm going to stay at the easy job and I'm going to have the easy life and the predictable future and the whatnot. Well, comfort is actually what you're seeking. Don't fool yourself into thinking that you're actually wanting some kind of adventurous, crazy life, because that's not what you're going after. The thing you really want is comfort, and that's what you're going to get. But if you want the reward, meaning the adventurous life, the ability to live like people don't get a chance to live most of the times, right? To see your dreams realized, to have an impact, to leave a legacy, those kinds of things. Whatever that looks like for somebody, that's really the reward, and you're only going to get that outside of your comfort zone. And so you're going to have to choose the path that's difficult, the path where you fail, the path where you learn. That's what that adventurous kind of path looks like.
I totally agree. I thought that the things I defined as my measure for success were in fact the things that would make me happy, or that were the things that were going to leave me with that sense of fulfillment that I longed for. And as I was, in the success of my career or in the success of building a family, able to check certain boxes, I had to wholesale redefine. It was an interesting thing that was happening in this bridge from being 30 to 40, where this bigger existential, what am I here for? But also, if impact really is the thing that you hope to have at the end of your life as a measuring stick for the way that you live, you have to force yourself out of what conventional, what safe, what and sometimes will expose you to harder things, because in those harder things, that's where living truly ends up showing up.
How much confidence did you guys have that what Rachel was doing, and with you on board to help kind of steer it in some ways with the gifts that you have, how much confidence did you guys have that this thing was going to take off and do well? Or was it just a very risky thing to walk away from Disney and kind of invest so heavily into to Hollis Company?
I think we both have a lot of confidence in ourselves and what we were building. We made the decision before her book came out. Her book came out a year and a week ago, and has just done an unbelievable amount of business. 2.5 million books were sold over the course of the year. It was the #2 book of 2018.
Wow.
Really incredible. Could we have predicted that? Absolutely not. So I think we had the confidence that the thing that she'd been building for this decade and a half worth of time was worthy of us pursuing. The hope that we had that it could have even more impact as we both were working on it together certainly was a part of why we'd change our life. But we've just been, so pleasantly surprised and grateful for the way that the community has responded to not just the book, but we launched a line of journals and we added more of the live events. And she has now an apparel line that's coming out on QVC in about a month and a half's worth of time. Her next book, the pre-sales are already just blowing our minds. This next book is called Girl Stop Apologizing. And it's, I think, in terms of things that are timely for what the audience is, hopefully looking for and needing, but also as the parent of a daughter, the idea that my daughter will grow up one day knowing that it was her mom who wrote this book that just impacted and influenced the way that women and hopefully men think about the way that women have to or need to ask for permission or need to get a check from somebody else before they can go chase their dreams is like one of the most satisfying things I could think of as a father and as a person who wants to be an advocate for women, generally. But we didn't know exactly what was going to happen other than believing that we had a calling put on our hearts to go do this thing and to bring these tools into the market. And delivering value is turning out to be a fantastic business model.
And I think that's where a lot of wannabe entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs kind of get hung up, is that they have this idea in their head that there needs to be some kind of litmus test of, I know for certain, I have some certainty about what I'm getting ready to do. And we never do. I mean, at the end of the day, we believe in ourselves. Kind of like you said, you guys believed in yourselves. And I'm not a big, believe it, claim it, whatever kind of person. But I do think there has to be that sort of unabashed desire to go out and just achieve and just to do and just to see what you can make of it, right? To give it a chance with the risk and all those things involved. And so I think that's really great that you guys came out and said that. Hey, look, it's turned out awesome for you guys. And hopefully many years down the road, it'll still be awesome. But there's always that unknown. There's always that risk. Anytime you guys put money behind a new product to release it, you don't know if it's going to be successful, but you're hoping that it will be, right? And those kinds of things that's just part of the entrepreneur life. And so I think it's great that you guys, it's comforting for me as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure for anybody else listening to this, to know that it's just not one of those things you just got locked up and you have the absolute certainty. So that's really good.
Yeah. Well, we just put a documentary that we made of one of our live events up on Amazon. You're welcome to see it. It's called Made for More. But in it, I give my keynote, which was you have to fail to grow. And a line that's featured in the film is me representing as a parent of 4 kids, which is like 1,000 kids. I am modeling in real time, right? I'm modeling as a dad how I want my kids to grow up as adults. And they could have had, a secure certain bank account at the expense of their dad being unfulfilled and not really pushing himself into uncertain spaces for the opportunity to grow. Or they could have me modeling, believing in our dreams and taking chances that can produce fulfillment that's going to always be unbelievably more important than what sits in a bank account. And as it turns out, you can actually create both if you find a way to tap into your passion, and as that passion ends up connecting with an audience. So in a fantastic way, it wasn't like, oh, let's go chase these dreams and they're going to be something that comes at the expense of what would have otherwise been a life we could have had at Disney. It's, oh, no, we're going to go chase these dreams and create a life of abundance, in part because of it being something that taps into the passion that we have in our heart and a real opportunity to create impact that maybe is more meaningful than movies. I mean, I don't want to smear movies because I love movies, but I'd like to think that some of the things we're doing are going to have longer lasting effects than someone's 2-hour experience in a movie theater.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. I think so. It's funny that line that you say that having 4 kids is like a million kids. This is absolutely true. I don't have 4 kids. I've got 2 boys. And, the cruel joke, or maybe this is God's way of a sense of humor, you get comfortable with the one kid and you're like, I got this. Like, this is actually, we've got a routine down. We know how this is going to be. We could throw another kid in here. That's like half another quarter of the family or something like that. No big deal. But it's like having 9 kids, and then every time you add one, I think up until like maybe 11 kids. And then at some point the kids begin to take care of each other. So you just need to have more than 4. I think that's the goal. Like if you actually had
negative.
You would actually have, if you had 7 to 9 kids, then at some point the older ones begin to take care of the little ones and you just get to go, live life. That's my understanding. I don't know. I think it just flips over at some point.
1 from 2 was crazy hard for us. 2 to 3 was not actually as dramatic. Our 4th, we ended up adopting our daughter after we created 3 human boys. And that journey in and of itself was just a crazy, crazy story and had a beautifully happy ending. But 4 feels at all times like a full house. I mean, just chaos at all times.
Yep, I can only imagine. So one of the things that comes to mind here is, as I've got an pretty much all male audience, 90 something high percent. I imagine yours is the opposite of that. Rachel's stuff, she's probably, so high on the female audience there. And the thing that comes to mind is if I look at the majority of small businesses are still opened up by men in America. And maybe it's like this all around the world, but pretty much in the United States, the vast majority of small businesses are owned by men. And so then I think about, okay, your situation is a little bit different from what most guys would expect. And that is, you've kind of gotten behind something that your wife is really, really good at and that you see passion in. And you've decided, hey, I'm going to quit what I'm doing and I'm going to move over here and I'm going to really support her. And then by doing that, I'm going to be supporting us. And I'm sure you've heard this. That's hard for a lot of guys to do. I don't know if I could do that, and I'm sure a lot of guys are shaking their heads going or nodding their heads saying, yeah, I don't know if I could do that either. What was that like for you? And maybe it wasn't even a big deal. I don't know. I want you to talk about this a little bit, but going from kind of this high profile position in Disney to saying, I'm going to get behind something that my wife does. And I'm going to, kind of be, a supporter role more than a stand out on my own kind of role. And maybe there's more to it than that. I don't know, but tell us about kind of how that sits with you.
Oh, it's real time. I mean, like, I go to a therapist to have a conversation about this in real time. I mean, like, here's the thing. I love therapy. If you don't go to therapy or think therapy is lame or not for real men, go. I'm telling you, It's great to have an objective human listen to you just throw up all over their couch. But the identity that I had associated with a business card that said president of distribution at the Walt Disney Company and the cachet that it came with and the connections that it came with, who would take calls or meetings, and going from that to this business that 100% has the primary commodity of our business, my wife, was one thing. Also, I went through a very, very interesting shift as for the majority of our relationship. Our 15-year wedding anniversary is coming up here in 2 months. I have been the primary earner for our family for all of our relationship until the last 6 months. And my wife's success, the book's doing well and the conference is doing well and her speaking doing well, has absolutely flipped that. My wife made more this last year than I have ever made by quite a bit.
Wow.
And what it was interesting for me as a man who I don't even think I recognized this, but I'm recognizing it now in the aftermath, was I, for a long time, had this identity in our relationship that said that in part she wanted me because she needed me. And so there was this association with my ability to provide. The provision was an ingredient in her attraction. And so now that she doesn't need me, the question of will she still want me is one that I get to unpack on the couch of a therapist. Now, the good news is I've had this conversation with my wife. She's like, you're an idiot. Of course, I never wanted you because of your ability to provide for me. But that doesn't mean that some of those insecurities that have lived inside of my head since I was rejected at a junior high prom, right? Like, don't exist as a 43-year-old human who's gone through an identity change. And an identity change even in the roles that each of us play in this relationship. And so it's been a thing that honestly it triggers in the like insecurity that it conjures, but also because we're working together, because we've got such a big mission, because we have so much belief in what we're doing, we can't let silly things like insecurity be a distraction from what we're going to do. So we've committed to sitting in the muck when it gets a little bit mucky and just like forcing ourselves to talk through it so that we can parse what's real and what's ridiculous, because we just don't have the time to waste.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. My wife and I have we've been seeing a counselor for a few years now. We've gone through a number of rough patches. Like I said, we've been married for almost 23 years. And so we got married when we were 18, high school sweethearts, and we were broke and stupid. I was more stupid than she was, and we just had a lot of rough times. And so we've seen counselors over the years. This last guy we saw has just been phenomenal, and he actually just retired, and so we don't know what we're going to do now. Maybe we need to go see your therapist. But
oh man, I hate having to start over. I had to start over when I got to Texas. Like, no,
it's tough because you got to re-explain everything, and then the therapist tries to offer you advice, and you're like, yeah, we've already been through that, But it is just tremendously valuable, as long as they know what they're doing and they're willing to really get into the muck with you. But one of the things that we've had,
I will say this, sorry, keep going.
No, you go first. You're the guest. I want to be a gentleman.
Well, no, what's also been really interesting in real time. Sorry, I just cut you off in the middle of your wanting to explain something too. But as proud people, ego as a thing that exists in our individual selves come together in now working together for the first time in the entirety of our marriage. The last 9 months have been interesting in part because she is an unbelievably proud founder of the company that I now get to run. Her willingness to acquiesce on the CEO title, which she held for 15 years to bring me on to help run this company, was something that was hard for her because she's a female founder of a company that is, I will say it and I'm unabashed about it, we're going to change the world. Yeah. And when I come on, the fact that the business has taken off is not in any way a testament to my being here as much as it is proof of 15 years worth of work coming to a tipping point and taking off. Now it's my job to, in the aftermath of that tip, make sure that we're, as a company, making great decisions. And in that, the friction tends to be, I have a sense of where I'd like to go. I am the practical, pragmatic partner in this. She is the dreamer, creator partner in this. And sometimes the pragmatic, I think we should take this deal, I think we should do this thing, comes at the expense of or in contradiction to the dreamer's belief in how to do it because of how either she's done it for the last 15 years or because of how it might compromise creativity to do it my way or because of the way the wind's blowing, because she doesn't want it to necessarily, and so a lot of the things that we're working through in real time are how do we serve the audience? How do we focus on and stay committed to the impact that we're trying to create? How do we stay focused and committed to wanting to make out on the regular? How do we keep date nights on Thursdays a thing that we do and still spend as many hours a day working on this business together?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's a strange thing that happens for a couple that gets to work together with each other. And there's that dynamic that you just talked about. And I think we'll dive into that a little bit more because my wife and I experience the same thing. But there's also this pressure to work your problems out. And I think it's a sad state maybe, but it's a different kind of pressure that my wife and I have actually experienced probably more growth, personal growth in a shorter period of time over the last 2.5 years or so running our businesses than we have in this, long period of time raising kids. Because there is something about saying, now people's jobs depend on us. Now people's products or whatever, their happiness depends on us. If we don't have our crap together, we're going to be hurting a lot of people, right? And that's always been true, though. I mean, because if you got kids and you don't get your crap right, you're going to be affecting your kids' life. You're going to be affecting your grandkids' life, right? And it's just a much more delayed thing. But there is something about the practical effects of having to work together and work your problems out that I think for some couples it can be a good kind of pressure. I know it has been for us, and it's also given us something to talk about and to work on together. You know, that's not the kids, right? And it allows us to see. It's helped me really in a lot of ways to see my wife's strengths where I used to think she's just weird and different and probably wrong. You know, now I see those as like really invaluable pieces that our businesses need, that our family needs. And so I'm just really, really thankful. I get to see her in action doing things that I go, oh, that's her weirdness is actually really, really good here. And she begins to see those things about me as well.
So good.
I think what I was going to say before, is that, okay, now actually that was the piece I was going to say before. So what you guys talked about, where you've got the sort of this tug of war between the creative, the visionary kind of person that's your wife, and then you, the more practical, organized person. You may be familiar with this book. I don't know if everybody else is as well, but it's The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. He actually he talks about the 3 different personalities in every business that make the business go well. And one is the entrepreneur. That would be me. In my case, that'd probably be. And my wife has this, we both have entrepreneur bents, but we all lean to one direction or the other. And what it sounds like is that it would be Rachel, in your case, is the entrepreneur, visionary, dreamer, always wants to upset the status quo to go do another, cool, the next thing or whatever. And then you've got the manager person, that'd be my wife in our case. And she's the one
in this case.
Yep, you in this case. And she's the one that wants to, the manager wants to kind of keep things organized. And in order to organize things, you've got to have a steady state. And then you got the technician, and the technician is just the person that just wants to get the work done and not have these big vision, discussions and not worry about how things are organized. Just give me the work to do and just let me get started, right? And there's always this tug, and that tug actually helps businesses to move forward. But it becomes a challenge because my wife and I, we have these issues on a daily basis almost of, I want to go do the next cool thing. She wants to kind of hold fast into what we're doing now and just get the steady state going. And there just has to be that give and take. And I think as we grow together as business partners, and like I said, we begin to learn each other's strengths and trust in our own faults, meaning I know I'm not as good at some things as she is. That really helps us to be better business owners and to have a stronger business and to move forward in the right seasons and to stay where we are in the right seasons. At least that's what I hope.
Yeah. I mean, our having gone through the exercise to understand which of those 3 we were, we each, I think, self-identified a little bit more as entrepreneurs. I, feel like I'm definitely more of a manager. She actually, as much as the vision piece of entrepreneurship is 100% spot on, is a little bit of a technician herself. And so we have to find people who are even more like self-identifying as the entrepreneur piece of the triangle so that we can have the third part of our triangle show up. But real clear division of who has strengths where and how to best tap into them and how those strengths show up in an org chart with reporting structure or how the meetings or the process that helps like the foundation of the business work were some of the biggest, like they were a little bit of tug of war at the beginning, but now that we've solved who does what and how it works, it's been so much easier for making sure everything gets done. Interestingly, making sure that we each have our identities afforded some breathing room in a world that could have it kind of congeal and come together has been some of the work that we have to do. It'll be interesting as if you are more the front of the business, if your wife ends up ever feeling like she has a need or want for more of an identity in the business for herself, because as a person who, like you said before, like came from having been more of a front-facing feature to now a supporting role, figuring out how to tap into my voice and tap into my passions, not just in running this business in support of her, but in whatever kind of creative endeavors I might have to also be, a tool provider to whether it's men or women hoping to understand men, is a conversation we're having in real time.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely key, and I have seen that actually. My wife, a little backstory that you probably don't know. I used to be a software developer, and I spent a lot of years in technology there was good things about it, but it drained me as a man. I really wanted to be creative. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to have some hands-on stuff and to make an impact in people's lives. And you guys are kind of in the same vein there. And I kind of, over the years, become more comfortable being on the front, kind of front line, put myself out there and having conversations with people and whatnot. And my wife has been kind of like anti-technology. She would be the, no electricity, just total hippie if she could be. And but she's kind of been coming around to a point where she was really wanting to be a little bit more front and center, like in the business side of things. And it feels strange actually for her to say, because that wasn't part of her personality before, but seeing her grow into this and wanting to help out with things and maybe be on a podcast one day or do something like that. And for me to be kind of put my pride aside and say, you know what, maybe my wife, maybe she, I value her and I know other people love her and value her as well. Maybe she would do really well in some certain areas. And, but then also still, try to, there's the aspect where I want to keep it my stuff, and I'm sure Rachel feels the same way. Sure. It's her stuff,
Sure.
And that's always difficult. That's a difficult thing to balance. And, but at the same time, if we think our spouses are awesome, we should, I guess, expect other people will as well.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
What kind of stuff that do you find that you learned from Disney, or maybe even the contacts that you had at Disney, things like that, has been a pretty easy crossover for you? Like the things that you bring right into Hollis Company and you're like, oh, I'm going to use this process and these systems that I learned there, and I'm going to bring them in place. I mean, are there things that you felt just make sense from you? It was an easy transition?
There have been some. Like I mentioned, we did the documentary. We put it in movie theaters. That was a thing that came out of having just put movies in theaters. But the idea of a brand, we're attempting to build a brand. I had an opportunity very early on to sit in a meeting where Steve Jobs was up on stage. He was having a conversation about brand deposits and brand withdrawals, and it was a conversation to a group of Disney execs. And the idea was like every single time anyone interacts with anything that you create, they are doing one of two things. They are either giving a withdrawal to your brand because they've had a bad experience, or a deposit to your brand because they've had a good experience. The more deposits, the more they like it, the more they're willing to buy it, almost sight unseen, when they just start to associate your brand with certain things. And I think we're attempting to, in the very earliest stages, have the same kind of thing where a person in this community has an experience with something we create. They have a, hopefully every single time, brand positive deposit kind of experience, and can walk away thinking, you know what, I do like the podcast that those guys make. I do like those events or the books or whatever it might be. And hopefully that means the next time we make it, we can reinforce that positive brand experience and have them come back. What's interesting actually is when you started asking the question, I actually have had to unlearn almost 2 decades of muscle memory. Wow. From having almost exclusively worked in conglomerate, big, huge business environments, because I'm very much running a startup. We have 23 employees, which we moved here in June. So 9 months ago, we had 6 employees. So we've grown very fast, which is exciting, but running a team of 23 people is unbelievably different than the more than 1,000 people I had reporting to me when I left the Walt Disney Company. In part because I was very much a top-down manager. I would get my lieutenants, I would give them a mission, they would say, okay, and he or she would go and do the work and come back to me only if there was a problem with a set of solutions. We'd pick a solution, and they would go and fix whatever was broken. Otherwise, the mission would be accomplished. Here, I actually have to roll up my sleeves and get my nails dirty, learning usually at the same time with a team of people that are themselves learning a new technology, a new partnership, a new business model. And that was not something when I first was starting I thought about consciously. I just figured, I'll tell the creative director or the person who runs events or our merchandise head to go do their work and then come back if something is broken, and give me a solution or a set of solutions that I need to consider, and I'll give them some advice. We've had mistakes happen because of having not been as involved or engaged. My wife, on the other hand, Like, my wife is a bottoms-up kind of manager, and for 15 years, she learned how to do every single job that every single person inside of this company has ever done. And so some of the, stuff that I can admit to as mistakes during my first 9 months were taking the learnings of this old job, or I worked at Fox before that. I worked at a talent agency before. I worked at these places that just had so many people with so many layers of experience and so much bandwidth that when I, came in here and thought I could just tell them, oh, we'll just go take that hill. They were like, I don't even know what a hill is. I have never taken this hill for sure, and I can't do it without you charging the hill with me,
That's so funny, man. I totally get that. So I was at a big bank before I went to a smaller company as a software developer. Very different experience. The big bank, there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of people you have to notify when you do something different, make a change, whatever the case is. You just feel like you're just caught up in the minutia of everything all the time. And everything just goes at a snail's pace, and it's maddening. I went from there to a smaller software company where it was, where it's just much more, things just happen much more quickly. And there's basically no red tape. You've got your marching orders, you just get stuff done. And that was much better. And one of my experiences from just having those kind of two different dynamics that I found is that, so we've got a company now. So Rustic in Maine is our largest business. We've got about 18 employees, and it's just grown tremendously as well. So I quit my job, not last July, but the July before that. And so we've just blown up from my garage to, we've got a building now and all this other kind of stuff. And there's an aspect where people keep asking, what's the next phase? What's the next growth, stage? When are you guys going to get to the $10 million mark or whatever the case is, right? What's the next, kind of big thing? When you're going to get a bigger building, hire more people? And one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners don't know from the outset is that bigger is not always the thing that you want to aspire to. There's something really, really sweet about having a small, really, really effective team of people that they know each other well. They get things done well, and and just we're kind of remaining small. We can define small however you want, but there is kind of a sweetness to it. There's a busyness to it, but there's also kind of a nice kind of efficiency to it. And when you grow beyond, say, like where we're at now, if I were to use my businesses as an example, we would have to have probably another building. We could duplicate the things we do now. We could have twice as many sales, perhaps, and but it also would mean more management, more top-down stuff, more people to make sure they're doing the right things. And I think those are kind of the questions that you need to ask up front is, what do we want this to become? If it becomes a 50, 150, 1,000 employee business, is that the lifestyle that I want to have? And does that look like the business that I want to have? And you absolutely have the opportunity to say, this is good enough, or to put some constraints there and say, we're going to be a 25-person business, and we're going to make the most of it. And, I'm not saying that you guys have to, obviously, but there is that sweetness of just being small and getting things done and everybody knowing each other and having that family feel.
Yeah. In real time, we're having just because you can build a nuclear weapon, should you, kind of conversation, because the opportunity that sits in front of us in real time is great. We just came back from a week in Los Angeles. We had 4 consecutive days of meetings at the agency that Rachel is represented by, which had everyone who has an idea of how to tap into the platform that she has or the way that she's been able to sell out these conferences or a combination of all of the things. And we're having that in real time. Like what would the trade-off to our lifestyle be for saying yes to this thing? And by the way, if there was a thing that was a learning out of the beginning of this adventure, the uncertainty of it becoming what it's become had us saying yes to a ton of things. At the time, by the way, they were prayers that we were praying that now in being answered, it's hard to complain about them, but our schedule feeling as full as it does in the context today of not needing to have said yes to things we said yes to, it makes it in real time a thing that we're going to be a little more, I think, conscientious of, hey, take time before you say yes. It's got to be an absolute yes, a got to yes, rather than a yes just because you can. If you're in a place where you're you think, but you're not sure, wait till you're sure. I mean, I wish that we had waited until we were sure about a couple of the partnerships that we've made our agreements with, because now that we have them, we don't have as much flexibility as maybe we had before, and they do come at a bit of a price on the lifestyle side of things.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have a clear bullseye, to know what your mission is, and to kind of know what, if you were to hit that bullseye, what would it look like, And if the bullseye for you guys is to touch the life of every woman in America or across the world or whatever, you're going to be a big company. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be. There's going to be a lot of people involved to make that happen. Depending on what that is. I mean, you could have a radio show, I guess, or a podcast like you guys do, and you're going to touch a lot of people. But if it's to individually have a conference where every, whatever the case is, that could end up being a very, very big, a big business. Same for me with Wolf and Iron. If my goal is to reach every man in America and make sure he knows the name Wolf and Iron and has an example of what it means to be a man in front of him in some kind of way, that could be overwhelming, and it may not actually give me the things that I really want, and it may detract from the mission. So I think that's a tough decision to make, and I think we have to make it sometimes as we move through. But at the same time, that means sometimes we feel like those opportunities that show themselves, if we don't say yes to them, they're not going to show up again, and maybe that happens. But I think it's also the understanding what's right for our family right now, and that's a tough decision to make. When I think about you guys, and I'm sure you've been compared to the Gaineses before, right? But when I think about like Chip and Joanna Gaines, and I don't know them personally, I just see them, as celebrities, like I guess most people do. But I think about their lifestyle, and I think, man, these guys do so much. I mean, they've got so many things going on. I just can't even imagine. I've read a couple of their books. I know in Chip's book he mentions that they've got personal assistants and things like that, and so it's a lifestyle that I can't really even understand. And I guess I just have to wonder, what does that meet their bullseye for what their family's supposed to look like and what they want their day to look like? And, I know it's easy to get carried away by the success of things. And like I said, I don't know them, but I think that has to be a question that you guys are always asking is, what do we want life to be for us?
Oh yeah. Every day, all the time. And I mean, the good news is, I will say, the unconventional life that we have now or have had in the past is the only one that we've ever known or that our kids have ever known. So there is, in a strange way, a normalness to like all the things that we're experiencing in real time. But we spend more time than most people, I bet, one, being really deliberate and conscientious of how we stay true to continually dating each other, stay true to the kind of quality time we need to have with our kids, and having real honest conversations about what the implication of us taking on any opportunity that might show up against the backdrop of wanting to maintain certain, boundaries for the things that are important in our lives. So, it's a real time, and I'm going to guess it will continue to be a very real-time conversation over the course of time, but it's good.
And I think one of the things that's good about what you guys do is that people expect a certain level. Well, they expect authenticity from you, right? And they want to see you guys being honest. So if you're like, man, we're just burnt out. The last 3 months have just sucked the wind out of us, and our relationship sucks, and we haven't hardly seen our kids. I mean, if that becomes the case, I think it's totally fine with your audience. I think they would want to hear, how to push things too far in the wrong direction, and how you get back on track, right? So I think that there's an aspect of what you guys have created here that actually is beneficial to kind of keeping you accountable in a sense, right?
Yeah.
To other people, and that's not a bad thing.
It's interesting. We had announced the tour dates for a book tour for Rachel's next book. It comes out March 12th. It's like on the heels of or on the back end of the success of Girl Wash Your Face. People were excited for the opportunity to be able to see Rachel speak, get a book signed, get a picture, and we'd announced 8 or 10 dates. And we got through like the holiday season. They were meant to start in kind of early January, and I guess we didn't get that close to it, but with enough time that it wasn't going to leave anyone who had made plans to travel, we had to let the community know that, hey, this just isn't something that we can have Rachel do without it having an impact on her ability to stay married, to stay a good mama to these 4 kids, to stay sane or healthy. You know, I mean, we gotta remember that as much as sometimes it looks like she or we are a cyborg duo, like there's a person who gets exhausted in the mix as well. And so we did that. Guess what? People were bummed. And I don't blame them, because my wife's rad, and I'd like to see her come to Charlotte or wherever. Charlotte was on the list, and speak too. But I also, as the person who's trying to manage a little bit of the mania, had to help draw some boundaries around where we had to, keep her as healthy as we possibly can. And it's been great for the beginning of this year. So sometimes we have to do those things too.
Yeah, it's great. And when you guys do come to Charlotte, I'd like to come check things out and hear Rachel speak. I know my wife would get a kick out of her. I'm sure I would as well. But I know she appeals mostly to the ladies, like Wolf and Iron appeals mostly to men. And so, but I think it could be a good time. Let's just kind of, as we're wrapping things up here, you mentioned something that I think a lot of guys are going through in their 30s and 40s. I know I certainly did. And I still question, what's my mission here? What am I supposed to be about? What's the main thing that I'm put on this earth for? And I think that a lot of guys, they're asking the question. They don't really know how to go through and resolve that in their minds. But just kind of give us an idea of how do you clarify, like, what's your mission now? What's the thing that you're about? And I know that may not be a simple answer, but just kind of tell me what you're thinking there.
Well, I mean, the company's mission broadly is this idea of putting tools into people's hands that'll help them make their lives better. I mean, the documentary is called Made for More. We do operate out of this position of believing that everyone has a calling and a purpose that's been placed on their heart by our Creator. And if there is a way for us in delivering tools can help you, the person who receives them, unlock some of that potential and bring whatever it is that you've been put on this earth to your community, then, man, we're doing some good work. So, my purpose right now has been supporting that broader purpose and supporting my wife in the midst of everything that she's doing. And it's also been, I've got a book that is coming out a year from now, and it's going to be in very much the same style as Rachel's book was for women, the lies that men have told themselves that have kept them in their own way, whether it's called Dude Wash Your Face or Dude Get Out of Your Own Way, something that will basically take the times that I can identify in my life. I believed something, whether it was because of masculinity, the patriarchy, society, my parents, the way I was raised in a church, whatever it was, and how whatever that thing was gave me a limiting belief as to how I could or couldn't do certain things. Once I uncovered the untruth in whatever that thing was, I was able to get out of my way. And hopefully by having a conversation that's honest and authentic and frankly makes me look like kind of a doofus in most of the chapters, it allows men to themselves admit that they too have struggled with, some of what I'm going to guess are some similar things. And if they can unpack that, maybe they can get out of their own way and they can have a better life. I think the thing that's so satisfying in the work that we're doing is hearing from the people who believe that their lives are better or changed because of having read the book or attended the conference, and their mindset has been shifted for having had someone else, and my wife, represent that it's okay to have felt this way, to, in that Me Too kind of moment, allow them to think, hey, if she was able to get past it, maybe I can too, and then take control of their life. And if there's something I can do, and having walked away from a job that society says was ideal for the opportunity of adventure, or pushing against some of the ways that I would have previously worried about how someone thinks about or doesn't, my needing to provide as the primary earner in my family, or what it might mean for me not to be that, then maybe it'll, let a man show up in a different way for his wife, or let him show up in a different way for himself. That's the kind of stuff that's driving my purpose in real time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think that book's going to be very much needed, and I think you have a really good perspective on things. I would say that you're probably more emotionally in tune with things than a lot of guys are, certainly than I would be, as my default. And so I think that perspective is going to be really good. I mean, we hear a lot from, the Navy SEALs of the world, which is fantastic. We need that perspective. But I think we need some guys that can just kind of be open and honest about life and have a different perspective on things. And so I look forward to the book where you make fun of yourself the entire time. And
yep.
I think it'll be great, however it turns out. So I look forward to seeing that come out. Well, it's been a fantastic conversation, Dave, and man, I'm just excited for you guys. I'm excited about where things are going for you. You mentioned this as well, and I think it's just so true, and I want the guys to know this. When someone tells you that you've made an impact on your life, it's a sense of fulfillment that's hard to describe. I mean, we sell some products, and we get a lot of good feedback on the products that we sell, but it's when somebody comes and says, Mike, I listened to your podcast, or, I saw a video that you did or something like that, and they say, it just made a really big impact on my life. It's really just changed the way I think about myself as a man, or whatever the case is. That's tremendous. And you guys are getting a chance to experience that, from all the feedback that you're getting from the people that your lives that you're touching. And I just wish you the best of luck in this. And I know it's going to be successful in tremendous ways. And I've just been really, really honored to talk to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the audience for listening. Hopefully y'all got something out of this, and I'd encourage you to, if there was a single piece of advice that I could leave people with, listen to whatever the calling is that you have in your life, and don't worry about whether it makes sense to the people that you have in your life, the people that, I worried forever about keeping happy, or whether or not I was conforming to the thing that would make them. Those worries and that want came at the expense of my happiness for a long time. You have to do what is on your heart without worry about how it will be received by other people. The people who mind don't matter. The people that matter don't mind. That's a Dr. Seuss quote. A good way to end.
That's a great way to end. That's right. All right, sir. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, brother.
Well, there you have it, men. I'd love to know what you thought about the episode. Feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media networks. And look, if you got something out of this, make sure another guy does too. Share the episode and make sure it gets in front of the guys that need to hear it the most. Until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.